From a small Sydney biker club born in 1968, the Comancheros rose to rule Australia's underworld, turning street fights into a billion-dollar meth empire. They built global drug pipelines, laundered over $760 million, and forged ties stretching from Turkey to Spain, New Zealand, and Asia. Their legacy was carved in blood, from the 1984 Milperra Massacre to airport killings, and later the world-shaking Operation Ironside, which saw 4,000 officers, 200 arrests, and 4 tons of drugs seized. Even their top boss, Buddle, fell in 2022 after years on the run. Now, with leaders jailed and empires collapsing, the Comancheros stand as a chilling reminder of how power, greed, and violence built one of the most feared biker dynasties on Earth. From street gangs to drug overlords, the real turning point for the Comancheros came in the late 1970s and through the 1980s. Back then, they were just another street gang, caught up in fights over territory, muscle power, and small-scale drug deals. But they weren't just thugs with bikes. They were calculated, ambitious, and quick to realize that violence alone wouldn't build an empire. They needed money, consistent, serious money. And in that era, the drug trade was exploding. It started small, with amphetamines. Then came cocaine, and before long, they found their gold mine, methamphetamine. The Comancheros weren't just hustling on street corners anymore. They were running operations like a corporation. They built supply chains, made overseas connections, and set up networks so tight and efficient that they could rival a Fortune 500 company. By the 1990s, they weren't just a biker club anymore. They were a powerful drug syndicate, linked with Middle Eastern crime figures and trafficking rings that stretched across continents. What made them truly feared wasn't only the drugs, it was how they handled problems. When business got messy, they didn't negotiate. They retaliated, and no event captured that brutality more than what happened on Father's Day in 1984, an incident that would forever reshape Australia's criminal underworld. The Milperra Massacre, bloodshed that changed everything. September 2, 1984. The parking lot of the Viking Tavern in Milperra, Sydney. A motorcycle swap meet was underway. Bikers trading parts, laughing, showing off their rides. But beneath the surface, tension was brewing. Comanchero founder Jock Ross was there with his men, unaware that his former lieutenant, Anthony Snodgrass Spencer, who had defected to the rival Bandidos, was also on site. Spencer came ready for war. When he learned the Comancheros were there, he told his men to arm up: rifles, shotguns, knives, chains, even baseball bats. What followed wasn't a quick fight, it was a war zone. Gunfire broke out in broad daylight right in a public parking lot. Police helicopters hovered above as terrified bystanders ran for cover. Among the chaos, a 14-year-old girl, Leanne Walters, was hit by a stray bullet and killed. By the time the shooting stopped, 7 people were dead: 4 Comancheros, 2 Bandidos, and that innocent teenager. Another 28 were injured, 20 of them seriously enough to be hospitalized. It became the deadliest biker shootout in Australian history, and the world was watching. But here's the twist. What should have destroyed the Comancheros only made them stronger. The massacre didn't end them. It cemented their reputation. They became known as Australia's most feared and disciplined outlaw club. Law enforcement doubled down, the media went wild, but the Comancheros kept operating, smarter and more ruthless than ever before. The dynasty under Mick Howie, power and paranoia. For years, Jock Ross ruled the Comancheros with an iron fist. But by the turn of the millennium, a new name was about to change everything: Mahmoud Mick Howie. In 2000, at just 22 years old, Howie took the reins of the club. Young, fearless, and dangerously ambitious, he wasn't interested in keeping things small. He wanted to build an empire. Under Howie's command, the Comancheros evolved from a rough outlaw motorcycle club into a full-blown criminal powerhouse. He expanded every operation. Drugs were still the core, but now the gang had its hands in prostitution, extortion, armed robbery, and elaborate money laundering networks. They weren't just ruling Sydney's streets anymore. Under his leadership, the Comanchero flag started flying in cities across Australia and even overseas, in places like New Zealand, Spain, and beyond. But with expansion came chaos. Howie's rise marked one of the bloodiest chapters in Sydney's underworld history. The streets turned into war zones, and the Comancheros' long-standing rivalry with the Hells Angels boiled over into public violence. The most infamous moment came in 2009. Right in the middle of Sydney Airport, passengers stood frozen as chaos erupted. Comancheros and Hells Angels clashing in broad daylight inside a crowded terminal. Witnesses later described it as something out of a movie. In the middle of it all was Mick Howie, accused of beating and stabbing Anthony Zervas, a Hells Angels member, with a metal bollard. Zervas didn't make it out alive. Howie was later convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to prison. When he walked free in 2015, Sydney's underworld had changed, but the hatred hadn't faded. The Hells Angels wanted payback. Inside the Comancheros, whispers of betrayal and shifting alliances grew louder. Then, on February 8, 2018, Howie's story came to a violent end. Two masked gunmen ambushed him outside a Sydney gym, firing 6 shots before speeding off. Howie died on the pavement, a bloody full stop to one of the Comancheros' most explosive eras, the new generation, global expansion, and sophistication. After Howie's assassination, the club didn't crumble, it evolved. Leadership passed to Mark Buddle, a man who would transform the Comancheros from a violent biker gang into something resembling a global criminal corporation. Buddle wasn't the kind of boss who made headlines for bar fights. He was the kind who built empires quietly, one connection at a time. Under his watch, the Comancheros became a machine. They weren't just trafficking drugs, they were running a business empire designed to make dirty money look clean. Luxury cars, million-dollar homes, offshore accounts, it was all part of the plan. Some investigators even believe Buddle's crew trained like soldiers, preparing for any kind of threat, law enforcement, or rival. By 2021, the Australian Federal Police had no doubts. The Comancheros were the biggest drug distributors in Western Australia, but what made Buddle's reign different was how far his reach went. His operation stretched across continents, moving cocaine from South America through South Korea and South Africa. Before it eventually landed in Australia, the Netherlands, and Hong Kong, every link in the chain was calculated. Every country played a role, some for moving product, others for washing money. It was a global puzzle built to stay hidden from any single police force. And the numbers, almost unbelievable. Authorities estimate up to $760 million laundered through the network at one point. In Brisbane alone, one vice president was reportedly running one of the most advanced money laundering setups in the country. The Comancheros had done it. They'd gone from street-level bikers to running a criminal empire, with the structure, discipline, and financial power of a multinational corporation. Except this wasn't about tech or fashion. This was about meth, cocaine, and control. And no one in Australia's underworld could match it. The Turkish connection and global reach one. Of the most important players in the Comancheros' global expansion wasn't even a full member at first. His name was Hakan Ayik, a Turkish-Australian fugitive who had been on the run since 2005 for large-scale drug trafficking. To Australians, he was known as the Facebook gangster. While most fugitives tried to stay hidden, Ayik flaunted his luxury lifestyle online. Fast cars, designer clothes, expensive holidays, all while being one of the most wanted men in the country. But behind that flashy image was a man with deep connections. Ayik became a vital link in Mark Buddle's operation. Through him, the Comancheros built bridges into Turkey, Europe, and the Middle East. He opened doors that no one else could: money laundering routes, smuggling channels, and international safe havens. Eventually, Turkish authorities uncovered just how far it had gone, seizing assets worth over $158 million that were tied to the Comancheros network. By 2023, Turkish police carried out a massive raid. 37 arrests, all connected to the Comancheros' global web. Investigators discovered that the gang wasn't just operating in Australia anymore. They had chapters and operations in New Zealand, Spain, the Netherlands, and across Asia. What began as a Sydney-based biker club had turned into one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in the world. The encryption app that changed everything, and in theory came the twist nobody saw coming. In 2018, the FBI launched one of the most brilliant undercover stings in modern law enforcement. They created a fake encrypted messaging app called AN0M and then secretly distributed it among criminals, convincing them it was the safest way to communicate. And guess who helped spread it through the underworld? Hakan Ayik. Thinking it was secure, he encouraged his network, including high-ranking Comancheros, to start using it. From that moment on, every message, every photo, every order sent through AN0M was being read in real time by authorities. Law enforcement agencies across the U.S., Australia and New Zealand suddenly had a front-row seat inside the Comanchero empire. They saw everything. Plans for drug shipments, money laundering, hit orders, and gun deals, all laid out in messages the bikers thought were private. Operation Ironside. The takedown by June 2021, it was time to strike. The world woke up to Operation Ironside, a global sting led by the FBI and Australian Federal Police, with backup from dozens of agencies worldwide. The numbers were staggering. On one single day, 4,000 officers launched coordinated raids across Australia. The outcome was historic: $45 million in cash seized, 4 tons of drugs confiscated. More than 200 arrests nationwide. In Western Australia alone, authorities charged 29 people, seized 31 firearms, 76 kilograms of drugs, and $9.5 million in criminal cash. It was the single biggest strike against organized crime in Australian history. One detective later said, "It was a criminal takedown like we've never seen before." The hunt for leadership, capture, and succession. Despite the massive crackdown, the man at the top, Mark Buddle, the Comanchero world commander, managed to stay one step ahead. He had fled Australia back in 2016, living under false identities across Dubai and Europe, surrounded by bodyguards and loyalists. But in July 2022, Buddle slipped up. He left Dubai, flew into Europe, and eventually made his way to Turkey, planning to cross into northern Cyprus. That's where it ended. FBI agents had been tracking him for months. He was arrested at the border and extradited back to Australia, where he now faces charges over the alleged importation of $40 million worth of cocaine. After his arrest, control of the global network passed to a new name, Alex Varela, a Spanish bikie who took over as world commander in 2023. Photos later surfaced of Varela wearing the Comanchero patch, proof that despite the arrests, seizures, and worldwide investigations, the gang was still alive, still global, and still making millions. The Comancheros weren't just surviving, they were adapting. And in the world of organized crime, that's what keeps empires alive. Recent devastation, the downfall, continues even after decades of power. The walls finally began to close in on the Comancheros. Law enforcement pressure was constant and unrelenting. In New Zealand, a massive 3-year investigation turned into one of the most damaging operations the gang had ever faced. 137 charges were filed against members and associates, including almost every key figure in the organization. Police described it as the single biggest blow to the Comancheros' operations since Operation Nova. Then came August 2024, when police in Tonga arrested 17 people connected to a Comanchero deportee who was trying to set up a new chapter on the island. The bust exposed how deep the corruption went. Officers found several kilograms of methamphetamine, and shockingly, a customs officer and a prison official were both implicated in the smuggling operation. By late 2024 and into 2025, things had only gotten worse. In New Zealand, nearly every senior patched member was either in custody or facing serious charges. The club's national vice president was arrested in Howick, Auckland, for his alleged role in importing methamphetamine and cocaine, another major hit to what was once the gang's most dominant offshore branch, and the hits just kept coming. In October 2025, more than 50 people tied to Operation Ironside were arrested across South Australia, facing 833 new charges. That brought the total number of arrests linked to the sting since 2021 to 164, a number that showed just how deeply the operation had shaken the very foundation of Australia's underworld. The legacy and what it all means, emoji D. Comanchero's story isn't just about crime, it's about evolution. What began with one man's fascination for a John Wayne Western in 1968 grew into one of the most feared criminal empires on the planet. From small street fights and backroom deals to billion-dollar meth pipelines spanning continents, the rise of the Comancheros shows how far ambition and violence can take an outlaw club. But it also shows something else. Something about modern policing. With intelligence sharing, coordinated international action, and one stroke of luck, Hakan Ayik unknowingly introducing the gang to the FBI's fake AN0M app, the world saw how even the most sophisticated criminal networks can be brought to their knees. That said, the Comancheros aren't completely gone. There are still chapters scattered across countries, still loyal members operating in the shadows, still money flowing through hidden channels. But their golden age is over. Their leaders are behind bars, their finances frozen, and their international networks shattered. What was once a symbol of outlaw dominance is now a case study in how modern crime collapses under its own weight. The Comancheros' journey, from a small Sydney motorcycle club to a global drug empire, is proof that organized crime never stands still. It adapts, evolves, and grows smarter. But it's also proof that when law enforcement agencies work together and use technology effectively, no empire is untouchable. The story of the Comancheros isn't quite over yet, but one thing is clear: their era of dominance is fading, and what's left behind is a trail of power, paranoia, and blood that changed Australia's criminal landscape forever.